much the same as last time. The objectives are 3 parts. I want to give you a quick update on where we're at right now, and then highlight some of the things that are on the plate and what we want to be doing going forward. Next, then, I'd like to answer the questions that you've asked of us here in the office and that you'd like to know more about. And then after that, we're going to just highlight some places where you can get information on projects and additional details on reports and things like that. So now, with respect to questions, some people have taken the opportunity to submit those when they responded to the invitation, but this is an evening for us to have a chat. So if you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand. And if you're on a computer or a tablet, you're going to click the raise your hand button, and that little icon with the hand will come up. If you're on a telephone, you need to push, type in *9. And when it's your turn to speak, then the moderator will ask you to ask your questions. So that's how you are able to speak. But if you choose not to, if you'd rather just type your question into the chat box, that's the alternative. Just before we get going, I want to make sure I do a few housekeeping items. I want to make sure that you are aware that this meeting is being recorded, and it will be shared on the Middlesex Center website, so those who aren't able to attend tonight can review it at their leisure. Also, I'd like to introduce Michael DeLullo, our Chief Administrative Officer, who's agreed to help out to make sure that you're able to participate and ask your questions. So if you do want to ask a question, then follow the order that I just described. And Michael will monitor, and then when you are in the queue and it's your chance to speak, he'll let you know. And I think that is it. Oh, yes, the questions that people have asked in advance of the meeting, I've tried to put them into sections where we're talking about a certain topic. So I'll answer those as we go through. If there are any left over, and there are a few, we'll cover those at the very end and make sure that we clean up any outstanding items there. So moving on to the next item. So where are we now? I'm going to cover off some financial bits. I want to update you on the asset management plan and give you an idea of what's going on there. We've received some money, so there's information on projects that are being funded. And the last item there will be the budget coming up. It's almost that time to get started, so I just want to give you a cue there. As well, I want to touch on the official plan and update you with respect to the next steps there. And then where are we going? There are 3 items here as well. You will get some information on 3 plans, 3 fairly big ones. The Middlesex Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is new, and I want to give you some introductory information and overview of that. The Community Services Master Plan was recently brought to you by our Director of Community Services, and I'll just outline that for people who haven't heard about that as yet. And then finally, I want to give you some information about the Community Improvement Plan that is now covering the whole municipality. And then, as I said, we're going to answer the questions that are outstanding. So I'll look at those when we get to the end. And now, oops, what happened? Okay, you have a Luddite here. I'm just going to go back here. Oops. Okay, I'll just stick with this one for now. So we'll stick with the financial updates and start with that. And asset management plan is number 1. So this is the asset management plan really is a keystone document that helps staff make informed decisions with respect to spending money on our infrastructure assets. It takes a cradle to grave approach. So the day that we purchase something, it goes into that plan and it's on the books until such time as it wears out or it's done or sold. Staff presented a draft asset management plan for review by members of council on May 12th, and the final document was approved on June 9th. And this work was all done in conjunction with our strategic asset management policy, which was approved on May 22nd. So all of this work includes then identification of all of the levels of service that our residents are expecting, and then the costs of maintaining those levels of service for our core assets and fleets and facilities, all of the things that we own. Identification of both the proposed levels of service and what activities will be required to meet them are outlined, and all the big work is done. We're really essentially in a very good place here. It's cleanup work that needs to be fine-tuned and finished up. So things like there are a few asset listings that need to be done for some of the equipment. The roads that are on the edges of our municipality, the boundary roads, there's some clarification there on making sure that both municipalities that maintain those roads are clear about who does which parts and what the levels of service there are. And then there are also some details with respect to breakdown of assets related to gravel pits to clean up. So staff going forward will be using this to work on the annual budget and prepare the 5-year capital program. And as I said, it helps staff determine exactly what they need to know and when things need to be replaced as far as moving forward. And so this helps then the finance department understand what levels of funding we need in our reserves to make sure that when it is time to repair or replace assets, that the money is there ready for use when it's needed. It also gives staff an opportunity to be aware of and make sure that they stay on the types of grants and programs that the government makes available at different points in time. And so by having the asset management plan, they know what's coming up in our plan. And when they see something announced from either the provincial or federal government, they know what the timelines are for us and what kinds of criteria we're looking at. So it's a big piece of work, and it's really good to know that it's done. I want to also make sure, though, that you're clear on what this means for you as a ratepayer. So when there are reserves in place and something needs to be replaced, what that means is we don't have this big up and down peaks and valleys for tax rates in the levy. There's nothing worse than not knowing what's coming down the pipeline and having a surprise. So this smooths the curve and makes sure that we know what the spending is. It's all predictable. It's all laid out in 20 and 50 and 80 years out. We're working to make sure the reserves are in place and it can support the spending in an orderly way. So the system will be automated as well for repairs and maintenance and that kind of thing. So what that means for you again then is that there are no unexpected closures or lapses in service or your ability to use certain facilities, for example, without a heads up. The other thing I want to touch on here is you might want to know, well, what does our report card look like? How are our assets doing? And I think the word to describe them is they're healthy. We're really in a very good place with our assets. And part of the reason for this is that many of our assets are really relatively quite new. So think about our water and wastewater. Those assets have only started going into the ground a couple of decades ago. And as we build out, we've got new assets going in place. So that is good news for us. The other piece is that this municipality has a good history of taking care of our buildings and our trucks, and there hasn't been neglect. Things have been generally very well maintained. So that is then good news again for our asset management plan. Things are not falling apart and wearing out before they should. So this is all the good news. On the other side of the coin, having set up this good stuff, our reserves are really not quite where they need to be. We need to continue to focus on building these to ensure we don't let things fall off our priority list. So we're not in bad shape, but this is something that we can improve on and we'll continue to look at in our budget works as we've moved forward. So with respect to grant updates, what funding have we received and what projects are supported? There's been good news on this front for a lot of different projects. So I'll start with the municipal initiatives. We've secured grant funding for the ARV accessible washroom at Weldon Park and Denfield Playground washroom in Denfield. The amounts there are $275,000 and $80,000. So those are significant funding opportunities for us. In both cases, the construction projects are beginning in the first part of August, and they will be completed this summer. As well, the municipality has received funds, modernization funds for IT review and upgrades. $40,000 is going to help ensure we have appropriate systems in place as we automate more services for our residents. So this will help ensure we've got efficient service and helps contain costs too. So that's really good news. And finally, as many of you know, we have been exploring ways to diversify our tax base and create more local opportunities for employment by attracting industrial or commercial ratepayers. So it was really good news to hear that we'd qualified for a $25,000 economic development study to help complete the research that's required to look into opportunities. So those opportunities are for areas that are, say, highway corridor businesses. So in terms of geography, that would be areas that are adjacent to or near major transportation routes. So we'll see what that research yields, and I'll probably be reporting that to you in the future. As far as community initiatives, we have applied for 3 grants here for Middlesex Center. All 3 have been submitted, but none have been approved as yet. But I thought I'd mention them in any case. The first one is an environment grant for Trees Middlesex Group, which is now going to be run by the Poplar Hill Lions. There's also money that's been allocated for grants for seniors for more pickleball expansion. That's a recreational activity that's really popular, and it'd be great to get that money to help expand this opportunities for seniors to continue to play pickleball and maybe have more opportunities to play. And the third thing that there's funding that we've applied for is for the Youth Center in Ilderton. So as I said, none of those are approved at this point, but stay tuned and keep your fingers crossed. Partner initiatives, a lot of things that we do in Middlesex Center involve working with our partners, either adjacent communities or with the county or other groups. And in this case, these are opportunities that have been explored with the county and other lower tier municipalities and relate to modernization. The three projects that I need to mention here are a review of a procurement process at the county, and there's development of an application review and automation. Development application review and automation, and as well a review of human resources systems and upgrades which are focused on improving things like efficiency and effectiveness. Other money news is relates to COVID relief, and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has provided us with funding $254,000 and $80,000 respectively, and these monies were forwarded to the municipality and to offset operating impacts. You may recall from the last time we met, some of the impacts are on our facilities. Those have been closed, so clearly no revenue or very little revenue has flowed into our coffers from those. So in terms of COVID and funding, really there's no significant change from my last update. The cost containment strategies that staff brought forward are still in place, and the pandemic, we've been managing all of the monies and ensured that overall our financial position is relatively healthy. As I said, the cost controls are in place and projects are being managed in terms of what needs to be done. And in fact, we've just had our audited financial statements and year-end work is all completed. All of that is done. And there has been a surplus that's been realized. So all of those monies have been parked in reserves and so forth. And we'll be looking at those opportunities as the COVID pandemic winds down and more work can be undertaken going forward. So really there's nothing new here, and there is no crisis in terms of financial position for our municipality. And the last thing here is the budget for 2022. At Wednesday night's council meeting, the treasurer is going to be reporting to the council and telling us more about the budget process, which again is new and improved. She's always going ahead with improving how to get input from residents and doing the education pieces around what the components of the budget are and all of those things. My understanding is there's going to be expanded opportunity again for public participation, and your input is going to be important and valued. So make sure that you pay attention to dates and surveys and all of the tools that will be in place to speak to what's important to budget for this year. So as usual, our communications specialist will be making sure that all the dates and information that you need to get involved and provide input will be on our social media sites and website. So now moving on to the official plan review. With respect to the official plan, just a little bit of stepping back for people maybe who haven't taken part in this process. This is the process that yields our official plan, and that is a legal document which summarizes our goals and our objectives and policies to guide land use, development, and growth in the entire municipality. So not only does it guide or provide direction for the physical aspects of our municipality, it's all tied in to our social and economic and cultural and natural environment too. So all of these aspects and variables are considered. Not only does it look at it in broad strokes, but it specifically addresses things like where will new housing go, or industry or commerce, offices and shopping centers, that kind of thing. Questions like housing density within those areas where new housing will be developed are addressed. How all of these are connected with roads and traffic routes, and what's needed in terms of schools or parks or recreational space, and where all these should go. Looking at all of the policies in terms of how we preserve green spaces and agricultural areas. It's a very integrated look at everything with respect to how our community develops. We've been through phase 1 already. That was late last summer. There were special meetings and advisory committees were struck, and there was the surveys that many of you have participated in were run. Phase 2 involved completing all kinds of summary documents and background reports and studies. And there was continued work with surveys and vision workshops through October. In phase 3, there were directions and recommendations reports. The work was continuing throughout the winter of 2020, and the report formed the basis of then a public open house in the spring. That was on May 6th. And that brings us to the present. So before the official plan amendments are finalized, there are a few pieces to finish up. Currently, the intake period is concluding, and the land's needs analysis is finishing up. But then there are 2 more steps that follow, and those are the public input on how future growth is designated. And that comes to the public in terms of an open house and a public meeting. So these 2 pieces, the statutory open house and the public meeting, will be conducted this summer. And again, check the website for information on how and where. I mean, I don't know, maybe we can actually have the statutory open house as an open house somewhere. That will be up to staff to decide based on our rules and requirements around COVID and meetings. So fingers crossed in any case. So
Mayor DeViet, we do have one question.
Yes.
From a resident, and it's just in regards to the potential development to assist with the housing requirements that are needed to offset the costs of soaring home prices. And the question is in relation to the community of Delaware and it being overlooked in the past OP reviews, and whether or not water and wastewater infrastructure will support this new housing in the near future. I think you you touched upon it, where we're in the final stages of the official plan review, and we're just waiting for the land needs analysis to come forward, which we will share with the public, and that'll help council and the public with input in terms of how we see future growth taking place. And with that will come infrastructure development.
Yes, and that question was submitted as well. So I have it in my notes to answer that. So thank you for bringing that up and clarifying as well. So I have now on my list to go through planning questions, because there were a number that actually related to this piece. I'm going to go through those now, and some of these are not necessarily 100% related to the official plan review, but they are planning type questions. So I put those all together. So the first one that I had was, are there plans for Glendon Drive to connect to Kamoka, especially in the newer Kilworth Heights West area? And the quick answer to that is yes, there are plans. A number of years ago, Middlesex Center approached the county, and in the end, the outcome was that we worked together with the county to create the Glendon Drive EA. And I think that was around 2018. Just so you are aware too, the reason the county is involved, Glendon Drive is a county road, so that the jurisdiction over that real estate is theirs. So this had to be an integrated approach to make sure that it got done the right way. So in any event, of course, right now you see there are no shops or restaurants or services on that streetscape, but the Glendon Drive EA lays out what the future streetscapes will look like and takes a look at things like pedestrians and cyclists and cars and so on. It shows how the county road will become a part of a village center, and it works right down to how wide the road will be and where the traffic circles will go and stoplights are located. Sidewalks, how wide they are for pedestrians or outdoor use, and things like where bicycle lanes and bicycle parking and things like that will be. I should note also that this county speed limit bylaw update is on the agenda for tomorrow. And so one of the changes that will be talked about there is the extending of the 70 km/h limit from Kamoka Road going east toward London to Kilworth Park Drive. And these are going to be, these are being considered in the context of the upcoming construction work that is planned for the roundabout at Glendon and Van Eck, and as well as the signalization of Glendon and Crestview in the near future. And as well as time goes on and we go into the future, there are more or further speed reductions that will be implemented as the area grows and develops over the coming years. So the pieces in the Kilworth area are going to take some time. I mean, it's still a subdivision with no core area, but for those who are interested in accessing the Glendon Drive EA plan, all you have to do is type in Glendon Drive EA in your web browser, and it takes you right to the county website. And on that website, you'll be on the page. There are reports, input from residents, documents with respect to engineering, so on, drawings and cross sections. I should warn you though that there is a note that says some of these documents are in excess of 10 megs, so it could take a while to download, but there is a lot of detail there. And if this is of interest, even just to browse through what the streetscapes might look like and that kind of thing, there's a lot of information there. So next question is, why is Middlesex Center reviewing urban growth in the northwest part of Kamoka when Design for Happiness and Kilworth West are undeveloped? So the northwest corner of Kamoka is the area north of Oxbow and west of Kamoka Road. And this was designated as a residential area in the last official plan, which was approved by the province in 2011. So it has been designated as a development area for over a decade. And the timing of the work actually is not something that we can control at a municipal level. Work starts and the pace of development there is up to the owner in development and is driven by factors like demand for housing and market variables. So the only thing that we are reviewing in terms of these this work that's happening in the Northwest are plans that the developers are presenting to outline in detail what kinds of houses are going into that area, how they're oriented, how the streets will go, is there green space? All of those questions are being looked at in that process right now. Pardon me. There's also a question here on an update with respect to Unity Village project behind the Wellness Center. So the Design for Happiness project, which includes the Unity Square itself project, is moving along, and the site plan is expected at the office before the end of September. And as far as the work on the community space itself is concerned, the exact details are not determined at this point in time. Public input will be solicited, and pardon me, I just need a little drink. The residents of Middlesex Center will be asked to give their input, provide their ideas and thoughts, and sort of say, this is what I'd like that 1 acre site to look like. You'll probably be commenting on what kinds of amenities you'd like to see there, how much budget should be allocated to this project. But this isn't a part of the phase 1 work that is going to be undertaken. So I can't give you an exact timeline. I can't reference that work on the square and how it will, roll out and what the timing of that is right now. But that will be something that will come to the public for input and thoughts. So again, stay tuned. There's also a question of updates to the proposed subdivisions in Coldstream. And so at present, the work that's happening in the office relates to questions that were asked at the last public meeting. So one of the big ones was questions about, well, there are this many homes coming and they'll be using well water. Should we be concerned about water tables and what impact will that have on my well? Those are the kinds of details that are being worked out right now. But public input on as far as next steps and so on, there are no dates or proposals or that are scheduled right now that I'm aware of. But if you were a part of the public meeting in the previous iteration or have submitted comments to the planning department, you will be notified of upcoming meetings and get information on the timing of those. As well as always, the information on public meetings is available on the website, and you can always monitor updates there. There's another question with respect to Delaware. Oh, this is actually, the comment is that the population is going to be exploding. It's going to double in the next quarter century in our area. And the question is, will Delaware get sanitary sewers to support new housing? And this question is right on the money. Our plans are always to direct growth to areas that are serviced. So the correlation between infrastructure, getting the sanitary sewers to support housing is exactly right. But I cannot give you an answer at present, obviously, because part of the answer, it lies in the outcome of the official plan review, and which will, again, as I said before, identify areas where growth will be directed and concentrated, and get into more detail on how various settlement areas will access or leverage infrastructure to ensure servicing is there at the right time in the right place. We have a question about zoning. It is our A1 zone properties permitted to operate as a wedding venue. The agricultural zone itself does not permit a wedding venue as a normal use, but recognizing that each property is different, and if a landowner wishes to use their property in this way, they would have to have a proposal completed and then go through a process of getting site-specific rezoning done. And this, of course, ends up in the public so that there's opportunity for the public to comment, and then council would consider the request. As a part of our official plan review, though, this is my tie into the official plan here, we are going to be looking at aligning our policies in the municipality with provincial guidelines that allow on-farm diversified uses such as wedding venues or agritourism. This is a direction the ministry has taken, and our opportunity to update everything comes with the OPR review. So we'll see what changes come out of that process. There's also a question about residentially zoned properties and their ability to operate a business on premises. Home occupations are allowed in most, but not all residential zones. And the zoning bylaw has additional standards such as the size of the business and maximum number of employees and prohibited business types that you need to take into account. Some of the home occupations that are recognized and can be included right away are things like professional offices. So if you're an accountant or a lawyer or an engineer working from home, that's allowed, or tailors or dressmakers, tutors, music classes or art studios, those kinds of uses are permitted. There are home occupations that are obviously out of the question. Those that negatively impact the neighbors or the neighboring properties and community itself with things like noise or dust, refuse, garbage, odor, those kinds of things, those are not permitted in residential areas. So here you're thinking maybe things like retail stores or workshops, contractors' yards or storage yards, these would not be allowed. So as I said, there are limits to the types of businesses, also things like signage, parking, floor area allowed, numbers of employees. But the best advice here is that if you have questions or considering about using your home as a place to work from home, run your business, please reach out to staff. It's always best to check with staff first, both in the planning department and the bylaws, to make sure that whatever is being thought about or proposed can be worked through the proper channels and the proper ways to the proper locations. So that brings us to the end of planning questions, unless Michael waves to me, and he's not waving, so I'm going to move on.
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay, so now with respect, so we've kind of covered some of the things that we've been working on and you needed updates on. I wanted to give you some information about some of the things that are newer and are going to affect things going into the future. First of all, the municipalities across Ontario are required by the Police Services, not the Public Service, Police Services Act 2019 to create a community safety and well-being plan. And the plan for Middlesex Center was developed in partnership with the constituent municipalities, that is all of our neighbors in the county as well as the county. Legislation allowed this partnership work to happen together to develop joint plans with other municipalities. So that was the route we took. Other things that were required as a part of this process were the requirement to work with advisory committees and representatives from local service providers in areas of mental health, education, health itself, community and social services, children and youth services, as well as policing. So it's taking into account a broad range of services and factors that these organizations work with to create a plan that makes sure that people can stay safe and stay well. There was also a commitment to work with the public. There were consultations held, and during that process, the planning framework for getting all of this done also had requirements with respect to how that work would happen. So there was a focus on collaboration, sharing of information across and between, no silos, that is. We want to make sure everything's being integrated. And there were requirements for performance measurement. So 4 areas of content were looked at. The focuses were on social development, which is to bring together agencies and organizations in a wide range of sectors to address all kinds of social issues and specifically complex social issues in an integrated way. As well, another area of focus was prevention. And here it was to be proactive, to implement measures, policies and programs to reduce risks before any crime or victimization or harm can occur. So taking care of situations before they happen. There's also an integrated effort to work to stop harm in a situation where there's a higher risk of something happening. So this was described as risk intervention. And then incident response was the final thing. And this is what many of you will think of as normal policing responses to crime and safety. For example, police and fire, emergency service, EMS, or welfare agencies that get involved. So these 4 areas of focus were sort of the big balloons that the plan had to address. And then within those, there were priority areas that were identified. So for the Middlesex plan, the groups that worked together identified health, that is both physical and mental health, as well as substance abuse and addictions were critical to look at. There are issues of housing and homelessness across the county that need to be addressed. And then quality of life is important to our residents, looking at things like employment, education and skills, food security, transportation, and municipal infrastructure. And finally, public safety, again, crime and mobility safety. So for example, in Middlesex Center, staff have implemented a Vision Zero strategy and have been rolling that out. Those kinds of initiatives are things that would address that public safety part. Again, I should clarify that the plan is a coordinated effort between all of the municipalities. And as such, we will be working on various initiatives, not only in our own municipalities, but in the municipalities across the county as a whole. Oversight and guidance will be provided from a Middlesex Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, and that the role there is to ensure that the strategies and actions are implemented across all of Middlesex. As well, there are subcommittees that focus on the priority areas, and they will be leveraging existing planning tables and inputs, and again, we'll be focusing across the whole of Middlesex. At the local level, there are going to be municipal committees, again, leveraging the assets we have in place to make sure we're not redoing things and to provide that local connection and view things through a lens that is unique to Middlesex Center. So there are tiers, but there is contact all the way through. Some of the committees will be focusing only on us and working through, not in silos again, but together, working through the different layers to make sure that the solutions are right for our communities in each of the geographies across the county. So this is quite a dense report. There's a lot of information. I would encourage you to read it. A lot of work has gone into identifying the implementation structures and identifying the priority areas, as well as specific goals and objectives for each of the 4 areas. And speaking of the goals and objectives for each of the 4 priority areas, I do have a question from a resident that fits in well here. And it asks, has Middlesex Center ever done specific outreach to our BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, People of Color community? If not, are there plans in place to do to review this in light of recent news events? And I think this question fits in really well with our discussion about community safety and well-being. If you read the plan, you will see that equity, diversity, and inclusion are 3 variables, 3 lenses through which each of the priority areas will be viewed. And I can add also that with respect to local initiatives, staff here in the office is finishing up a formal diversity and inclusion policy, which aligns with our strategic plan and is one of our deliverables on the community's safety and well-being plan. Since the recent events, both finding of the graves of the Indigenous children and the tragic events in Hyde Park, I've had some good conversations with a number of residents who reached out and spoke to me in the context of those events about a number of issues, specifically those conversations related to religious differences and diversity in our community, LGBTQ issues, and especially for youth in school, and how they're living that difference. And ageism was another one. It was really good to hear that these residents want to work with our communities to make sure we live in an inclusive community. There was a clear recognition that we're not terribly diverse here compared to other areas of Southwestern Ontario or the province at all, but they want to be involved. They do want to work to help make sure things are addressed, and are asking how could this be made to happen. So the exact hows aren't clear at present, but ultimately I think whether there are activities to educate or to raise awareness, make connections, or organize celebrations, I've made it very clear that me personally, I'm ready to work with them, and staff is as well, because they're always there to support and enable and help with any of our organizations and groups, associations. There's a history of working together. And so I think the building blocks are in place. And I think this is something that we can move forward if there's an interest and a desire from the people that I've spoken with to get things going. Another thing I should comment on is that I'm sure you noticed, just as I was telling you about the Middlesex Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, that Middlesex is the county. We're working together with them to make sure that change is being planned and put in place across all of the county. So Middlesex Center, like some of the other smaller constituent municipalities, is not huge. We don't have all kinds of resources to create positions and departments. You can't compare the size of our staff and our budget to, say, our next door neighbor in the City of London. So when we want to accomplish things and get things done, a lot of the things that we work on are worked on together with others. And whether it's resident groups, our neighbors next door, the county, or for that matter, the Middlesex Health Unit, which is also involved in delivering programs that help us do better. This is how things work. So I'm looking forward to working with the residents and to the conversations and their ideas and plans on how we can make sure that we're the community we want to be. And moving on now to the Community Services Master Plan. Some of you, I'm sure, are aware that the update of this plan is a work in process. This is the document that guides how the future of all of our recreational planning and how the services and infrastructure will be there in place to facilitate the future wants and needs of residents. So I think a decade ago, pickleball was probably something most people didn't know about. And today there are lots and lots of people who want to do that. So have to make sure that we're ready to work towards things that people decide that they'd like to try out if we can. So in anyways, this plan is going to present a vision for the future, outline our goals and objectives for activities with respect to open space planning for parks and community centers, arenas, and all the recreational programs that take place in those buildings and areas. So this plan covers 5-year plan out to 2026. And thank you again to all of the people who have taken part already in the surveys and so forth. The public open house was held on the 28th of June. Some of you may have come to that. The staff members presented this findings from the survey and asked attendees for more in-depth information on specific topics. So that's bringing us to the end of the stakeholder and community engagement piece. Phase 3 is the part that we're sort of getting ready to go on, get started on now, and that is the development of the plan itself and to identify the priorities. Staff is still reaching out to certain major park and facilities users and to gather those inputs. There are still opportunities for public input, and the next public input or open house session is going to be held sometime in September or October. Again, details will be published, and your opportunities for how to get engaged in this will be shared on the website and our community social media channels, Twitter and Facebook, as well as the Middlesex banner and the e-newsletter. So there are lots of channels there, whichever way you like to get your information. Keep an eye out for that. And then after that last input session, the target completion date is the fall of 2021. And at that point, after the master plan is developed by the end of October, it'll be brought forward to council in December, and then the final plan will be considered there by council. And finally, the third item here is the community improvement plan. And I guess some people wonder what a CIP is. It's a tool that allows the municipality to direct funds to implement initiatives to specifically designed designated projects in different areas of the community that will help encourage owners to revitalize their business, outdoor business structures or signs. And it's really to revitalize and stimulate development and redevelopment. The first CIP was developed for Ilderton in 2013. And in the beginning of 2021, that is in January of this year, Council adopted and expanded the CIP from Ilderton to include all of Middlesex Center. So it's the Middlesex Center CIP now, and it focuses on redevelopment across the entire municipality. Because it started earlier this year, it's really great to be able to report that there has been a fourfold uptake year over year in terms of the numbers of businesses in the community that have applied to improve their facades or put up new signage, make accessibility improvements to their facilities, and in some cases take care of some of the pandemic related expenses that they've incurred. Again, details are available on the website, how to apply, deadlines, and timings for application. But that then brings me to the end of the subjects that I wanted to highlight for you, and we still have questions that remain unanswered. And here are the ones that I have. The first one was what can be done, what more can be done with respect to the crosswalk in Ilderton. And I've kind of smile. The crosswalk in Ilderton, I know which one you mean. It's one that we've had a lot of discussion and a lot of time and effort has gone into dealing with different tiers of government on this, because it is a county road. The answer to this is that staff and councillors can continue to advocate on behalf of all the residents to bring forth ideas to the county engineer for consideration, to look at different ways of dealing with this particular crosswalk, whether it's education or particular signage that's new or line paintings and that kind of thing. There's really not much other effort that the municipality can expend to influence to change this. The only thing, as I say, is advocate and influence, and that is something that we're doing all the time. So I don't know that I can add any more to that one. With respect to the results of the sidewalk and street lighting survey, this one's not closed yet. So if you haven't heard about it and want to participate, it is still open. So shoot, I think I forgot to, I think it's July 19th. I stand to be corrected, but it's not long. I think it's just coming up. So July 19th, I think, is the right date for that. So if you haven't done it yet, take a moment and complete that. And then as far as the results, stay tuned. They'll be coming. But this will be, the information, just so you know, will be used in terms of the budget that's going to be done for 2022. So it'll inform projects and dollars to be allocated. So that's that for that one. The municipal response to vandalism and destruction of local mailboxes. Well, the municipal vandalism isn't limited to private property. This is an issue across public spaces recently across all of the municipality, and staff has been working very closely with the OPP to learn from them about what more can we do, how do we continue to work together, talk about different options or steps that might be available. One of the things that has happened now is staff has contracted a private security company to complete random checks in our park areas across the whole municipality to make an effort to try and stymie the vandalism and to limit the amount of it. The destruction of assets is clearly not a good thing, and it costs taxpayers money, and it needs to stop. But as far as mailboxes and other types of damage to destruction of personal property, some residents find that installing cameras or lights and things like that, these are mechanisms that are available and are worth considering. I'm not sure you can put a light on your mailbox, but other vandalism that happens on private property is deterred by that kind of action. So the only thing I can suggest is that residents should continue to contact the OPP, because when the when the calls come in, they know the locations then, and they are able to plan some of their routes in terms of making sure they take a trip through at night, or they know where the hot spots are, and that it helps them plan their work as well. So report those to them, and maybe we can slow down some of the destruction of our properties. I have a couple of other questions that came in from residents that haven't been answered yet or didn't actually fall in the box. The other ones that isn't listed here on the screen is, can you economically justify all staff positions? So efficient and effective use of all resources, not just staff, staff time and the numbers of staff, is a top concern for all staff, not just managers in the office here. Middlesex Center is a growing municipality, and staff carefully monitor and take a look at things like service delivery and resident expectations, and try to determine how best to meet the needs and allocate the right number of staffing for each situation and make sure that it is justified. So, for example, the other night, as I said, our Director of Community Services presented his report, and there's discussion about growth and need for these kinds of parks or services and so on. So if there's a need for parks and some of those come online down the road, there comes a point at which the staff cannot complete all of the work, so there has to be additional staff hired. Or with respect to inquiries, as the municipality grows and there are more residents and residents have questions, there is a step point at which there isn't enough time to answer all of the questions or enough people to answer all of the telephones. So those needs are monitored, and staff has to be hired to respond to the needs of the residents and maintain the service levels that people expect. Council, as the governing body and has the fiduciary responsibility for that is like the biggest thing that council has to do, is make sure that your money as ratepayers is properly spent and in the right ways and the right times and the right places. So I think it's fair to say that council needs to be convinced when the budget is presented that the spending is justified. I don't know if all of you know, but we have two council members that sit in on all the budget process meetings. So they attend the meetings, and they look at the presentations from each of the directors, and they see what the preliminary budget requests are and hear the case that staff makes for all the details for the project that they're pitching. They hear all of that. And so when they hear all of the details of everything, they understand and learn about too, what is the standard of service that needs to be met. In some departments, those are set by legislation. There is no wiggle room in terms of what has to be done and how. So those needs have to be met. There are service levels that our users are used to. Ice surfaces that aren't cutting it raise complaints to staff. So there are frequencies of maintenance of ice and things like that that need to be maintained too. So whether it's legislatively defined or whether the work is defined by your expectations, these things have to be considered as you go through. I should backtrack a little bit here and give you an example too. Highlight some of the numbers that have changed recently too in terms of staffing. Arnie Marsman is our director, our chief building officer and bylaw enforcement and head of bylaw enforcement. And recently, during COVID, 3 people have been hired in that department for the chief building officer's department. And that sounds like a lot of people in a short time, but there's more to the story here. Middlesex Center has had to increase the staff number to meet its own needs, but for years now, we have been delivering services to Lucan and Biddulph. And balancing our needs against, what kinds of peaks and valleys there are is sometimes hard. But one of the things that has come out of this growth period in our area and others is that because of economies of scale and so forth, we are able to have staff members provide services not only to Lucan and Biddulph now, but also to North Middlesex and Adelaide Metcalfe, Southwest Middlesex, and most recently Newbury. There has been modernization of the process. Electronic filing of building records has been put in place. But when you look at the big picture here, the important thing to ratepayers is that the department is 100% cost recovery. There is no levy that funds these services for the residents. So this municipality is now at a point where it has information about what its operating costs are and what the services are, and the costing to charge that work out to other municipalities can be done so that people can be fully engaged and at the same time provide service. The other part of this equation is a soft variable in some ways. When you have a department that has now 3 more employees, there are opportunities to hire people who are more junior and growing into the role, move people into a different role if they've been in one, and give them an opportunity to expand their ability to manage projects or different kinds of projects. And the bottom line with all of that is something that helps with attraction, retention, and development of people. And to be an employer of choice is really important in the municipal sector because recently an article in the Ontario Building Association periodical noted how difficult it is to hire, to find and hire qualified building inspectors and officials. The 3 people we hired, we didn't have a problem attracting anyone here. So this is a win-win. It's a win for staff, it's a win for our residents, and a win for our neighbors. And this is just one example of how changing staff numbers and economics and the soft variables all work together. We're providing the mandatory legislative service, and we don't hire people unless we need to, but we can build in flexibility for our staff to do what we need done here and balance it off with revenue from others. So that's a long-winded explanation. I hope it makes sense, but it gives us flexibility, and it also isn't always just about the number of people who are here. It's how they're being used. So that is all I have for questions. Unless there's some, I don't see any hands going up. So
there is one question, Mayor DeViet, and it's in regards to internet infrastructure and any improvements. there's information that I shared with everybody in regards to the SWIFT announcement that took place earlier in the year for Middlesex County. It was $7.5 million that was invested, and that was those monies are going to be used to help grow communities like Middlesex Center and the other municipalities in our county.
Yep, that's right. And actually on the County Council agenda tomorrow is one of the agreements from with SMART that's not happening here in Middlesex, but it's part of that Middlesex County funding that you've referred to. So some of those projects are now getting out there and getting funded and are going to be starting. But there's still a lot of work to do to get our municipality to a point where everyone is getting the kind of service that is needed to work from home or allow our kids to access educational opportunities, or for us to have an opportunity to develop more commercial kinds of enterprises across our geographies. So that is something that we have to keep advocating for, and just leveraging every opportunity we get to get funding for that. So thank you for that question and for that explanation too, Michael. If there's
I have one more question from Mr. Bill Timmermans. I'm just going to allow him to talk.
Okay.
Go ahead, Bill. You just need to unmute yourself.
There you go.
Hi, I'm sorry, I missed the opportunity to comment on development for Delaware. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Mr. Timmermans.
Oh, okay. I have a question, Madam Mayor. I'm just going back to the official plan review. In one section of the official plan review by WSP Consultants, it states that sanitary sewer force main for Delaware may be constructed in 2026. Now, in another section of the official plan review, it also states that sanitary sewer infrastructure in Delaware is possible within the planning horizon of the plan. Now, I don't know how wide that planning horizon is, and I guess I'm asking Madam Mayor is, what time frame do you see those services for Delaware could be constructed, and can they be available made sooner than what is mentioned in the official plan review? Like, I've been involved in this since 2008 in the official plan review for Delaware, from Delaware, Middlesex Center, sorry. And then it was bounced back to 2015, I guess, and Delaware was brought up again, and Arnie Marshman chaired a meeting at one time at the community center in Kamuka, and there was some landowners attended that. And the last report we had heard that time was from Mayor Al Edmondson, that back in 2015, had said probably we're looking at 7 or 8 years down the road. So here it's 2021. And when I look through the official plan review by WSP, I just see like it almost looks like we're going down the same route again. I just want your opinion on it, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I wish I had a crystal ball. I think that's, I could tell you that I have no information that there's a plan in place to do this next year or the year after. Like the official plan review is what drives that development. I mean, staff is always looking forward to make sure that what if, but as far as, I mean, shovels in the ground or tenders being placed to put that kind of work hasn't happened at this point. I think, I hate to say it, but I think the right thing to do is to see what the official plan review yields and what, sorry? Oh, sorry, I thought you were saying something. See, this is a process, it's a public process. There's got to be input from everyone. Also the review that the lands need study needs to be completed. All of the variables have to come together and looked at in one integrated, coherent fashion. I think Delaware is definitely an area that is a settlement area that it's been on the radar, as you say. It is one of the areas that is say Denfield maybe, or Lobo or Burr. Those are areas that are unserviced and not on the radar. Delaware was identified as a growth area last time, but say that servicing piece is something that will depend on numbers and the size and interest in terms of expanding into that area from all of the participants of the planning process. Say I don't have a good answer for you. It's coming, and even then, I say so many people have wondered, why is the farm on Kamoka Road being developed? Well, how did that happen? Say it was a decade in the making before houses showed up in Kilworth Park West or the northwest corner of Kamoka, for that matter, at the Bantram development. So if the world continues to grow at the rate it's growing, I think we're a popular destination here in our area, but I have to leave it at that. I have no good answer for you at this time, and it's certainly something I can't promise and say, oh yeah, it's going to happen.
If I may speak for many of the business owners here, we all feel that Delaware is in a unique position and location. I think a better location anywhere in Middlesex Center, and we are based right on 402. We've got Longwoods Road, Highway 2, and now we've got the Ford plant that was purchased by basically Amazon, which is going to create anywhere from 800 to 1,100 jobs. I think job opportunities, location here is next to none when it comes to Middlesex Center. That's our take on it. I hope they have a serious look at it. That's all I can ask for.
And you've raised some really good points. As I referenced the development study for the highway interchanges, the $25,000 that we received, to say this, no stone is being left unturned. Doing that study and showing or getting information that will show us the way to move forward on that kind of thing. I agree with you that the areas that are adjacent to the 402 are the best places to have commercial and industrial kinds of development. You don't want that kind of development happening too far away. You don't want it happening in residential areas or too close to residential areas. There are always questions and difficulties when that kind of development is butted up against homeowners. I know other municipalities are having that issue with one side of the street being commercial and industrial and the other side being developed now for homes. So yeah, your points are right on the money, and they're not to be taken lightly. Those are all valid and good reasons to look at Delaware for a growth area.
Well, thank you for your comments, Madam Mayor.
Well, thank you for taking part. Yep, thank you for your time. If there are no questions, is there a question? No. Okay. The last page just is a summary. This is where you should look for more information. If you haven't gone to the website for the reports and plans, there is a specific, you see the plans and strategies reference there. That just click on that. All of the plans and strategies that I've spoken to tonight or highlighted are there. There's a lot of good reading detail in those. If you have questions about anything in those plans, then you can speak to your counselors or staff or people will be glad to help you with clarifying things in those if they're not clear. I don't think there's anything else. The web pages are all up to date, and there's a lot of good information in there. The only thing I'd like to do is then, in closing, if there aren't any more questions, is say we're very grateful for having our employees that have been working through the COVID period. Their flexibility and focus, their determination and dedication to the community has been just outstanding and noteworthy. They've made it look really easy a lot of the time when they've done things and redone and redone and redone. None of our services suffered through the COVID period. Everything we depended on was delivered. And at the same time, they've continued to keep juggling all the kinds of reports and research to keep us moving forward and put us on track to start our recovery period in a good footing. So they've stepped up and handled this crisis on every level. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you to them. I think it's not just beneficial to us, but the work that they've done has made us better in a lot of ways too. So thank you all to all of staff, and thank you to all of the residents who've taken time to participate in so many ways to complete the surveys that have been out and attend virtual meetings. We're always hoping to be able to see you face to face, but the input and feedback you've provided is helping us develop the tools and make sure that the programs are being thought through. I also appreciate your time this evening. I hope you've got some good information tonight and that your time was worth spending here. The updates and informations have been unfolding, and hopefully they've answered some of your questions and concerns about where we're headed. I hope this summer is better for you than the last, and I want to wish you a good summer. Enjoy it, to stay well and healthy. And I thank you again for your time this evening, and look forward to seeing you in person. Have a good evening. Thank you.